to the Vivid Voices podcast, where we have bold conversations with great leaders. And two leaders with me tonight are Rozana Yunus and Terence Lee. Welcome to the show, Terence and Rozana. We'll be discussing about work from home versus work from office. And it is such a privilege for us as we have both of these great speakers because they are both important people in their own field of work. Let me introduce first Terence Lee. He is the chief pilot of flight safety for the airline that he works with. What he does for a living is he analyzes and investigates events to prevent future problems through proactive risk management by developing and implementing safety process and procedures. Very important work. So if you've been flying just like me, you'll thank him for all of these. And his main goal is to ensure all flights to operate safely and keeping passengers and crews safe. So it's one of those people who you don't really see in front, not on the counter, but it is important for him to be there because else I would be afraid to fly. The next speaker would be Rozana Yunus. A few things about her is that she has been working for over 20 years in the human resource development and as well as resource management and corporate services. She's married with two beautiful children. I met her daughter, Chirpy Bird. Absolutely love her. And as well as she worked in the office for most of her working life, except when COVID-19 happened. There's a lot of things that we can gauge from these two people. With that, I'd like to ask, let's start with Rozana first. Rozana.
Hi, Hani.
Hi, Rozana. Thank you for being here tonight. So, tell us, Rozana, when work from home when work from home mandate hit, because you mentioned you've worked from office, throughout your entire life. Were like, yay, pajamas all day, like, oh no, my friends, my food, my free coffee. Tell us, Rozana, how was that for you?
I still remember when we were mandated to work from home. I think that it was somewhat of a shock to my system because I'm just so used to working from the office for various reasons. And I couldn't understand, not to say how to work from the office, but how do I work with other people from the office? And it was really weird because I remember when I was working with my boss, she was actually saying that, we need to give guidelines to people how to communicate when we're working from home. And I was like, what do you mean how to communicate? And she went on to say, and you need to specify what tools we should use. So I was like, wow, this working from home is not just like I'm at home doing work. It's really, you have to take into consideration so many things, which I think I took for granted because I'm in the office, and that it was just a different way of approaching it when I had to really work from home my 5 days a week. So I would say that it was a shock to my system for sure. So essentially, we had to force communications to happen. We made it a point I get updates from my team members on a daily basis to find out what they're doing. And it was funny. It's not that I'm wanting to check up on them every day, because in the office, I wouldn't normally. In the office, I would have once a week updates. But when I'm working from home and so are they, I'm speaking to them for 10 to 15 minutes a day just to find out what's happening. And sometimes the meetings extend beyond 10 to 15 minutes a day because we end up talking about issues that probably we've never spoken about before when we were at the workplace. So it was really interesting to have that uninterrupted time together via our tools. Now, the thing about using tools is that we were using Microsoft Teams. And because I'm in my pajamas, truthfully, I don't turn on the camera, and neither does the other person. And we don't force each other to do so. But, it's difficult because when you're in a group meeting and the other people are really, really quiet, you have no idea what they're doing. For all I know is that they could be playing Roblox, they could be watching Korean drama, they could be reading a book rather than pay attention to the meeting. So to me, that was something that I struggled with, especially for those who chose to remain quiet during meetings specifically. And I cannot, and I'm not sure whether they really understood what we were talking about. And even if I was to ask any questions, do you have any questions? Do you understand? Nobody wants to say anything. And you're like, oh, okay, I just assume that you all know what we just talked about and you all have to do it. But then we'll see the results, what happened after that. But there is a bright side to working from home, which I appreciated, which I only appreciated as we were about to embark going back to the office after COVID-19 had subsided. And that was about the time I was able to spend with my family. I was able to have breakfast with my mom. I was able to see my mom for lunch and be on time for dinner. And when I took breaks, I got to see my children. And I have a big pantry downstairs. So food was easily available. I did gain a lot of weight during COVID as well. So there's some advantages about working from home, but there's also some things I struggled with being at home, and being at the office allowed me to be able to segregate who I am at work and who I am at home because of that structure. I found that when I was working from home, I was literally working from when I rolled out of bed after breakfast into my office from 8 a.m., come out for lunch or dinner. But I would end up working until 10 p.m., 11 p.m. I basically didn't stop. So it's a no wonder productivity increase is because I was working longer hours than I would have originally in the office. And I was on most of the time rather than switching off most of the time. And it's not to say that it's about making choices or your work-life balancing or blending. I think it was just really simply getting caught up in the moment and realizing that what else is there to do but just sit behind my computer and do the work itself. Of course, some might say I'm a workaholic. So in that sense, I was able to be productive, but in some sense, it might not have been healthy as well. Yeah. So was I Yahoo, yay for work from home? Not entirely, because it was the unknown for me. However, there were benefits that I saw. It's just a matter of being mindful of how I also utilize my time. That's my sharing, Hani.
Awesome, Rozana. Okay, wow, yeah. I'm with you on the multitasking thing, and I'm with you with the actually working longer hours. But at the same time, I share the same sentiment. I love the fact that I can see people in my house and actually seeing them and having some time with them without the traffic, right? Because that was the case of most of us. Now let's go to Terence. Terence, by the way, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy young old. I'm sure you get younger every year. I'm sure people say that. Okay. So Terence, in your industry, especially, it is full on not only people use that on the daily basis for professional work purposes. It is one of the driving force of the tourism industry too, right, Terence? So, talking about COVID is one thing, but what about your industry? Are you guys more work from home or work from office? How does that landscape change afterwards? Where are you in this? Are you yay pajamas all day? Because I don't think you could do that. But are you, oh no, I need my office, I need my people, I need to talk to them, I need to see it. Where are you on this, Terence?
All right. First of all, thanks for having me this evening, Hani. And what I can say is, because of the COVID, at first, I felt relief. Because before I got into this safety role, my occupation required me to be more of a hands-on type of person. I'm on the operations side. So I had to deal a lot with stakeholders outside the company itself. So it's really hands-on. I have to get face-to-face. I have to talk to people, get in touch, and settle things face-to-face most of the time. And speaking of our industry, it was one of the most or the worst hit, whereby our line operations team cannot fly, cannot operate. However, in order to maintain their recency, to maintain their skills recency, they will need to still fly the planes once in a while, because the planes that they are operating here in our company do not have a simulator. So, like it or not, they still have to fly the real plane. And because we are serving the rural communities, some flights will still have to go on. So it did not change much on how, especially the pilots or the cabin crew, operate. The biggest change for them would have to be getting onto meetings, like through town halls from the top management who wants to share the latest news and info to the company on what's the latest update on the pandemic itself, or what's the latest update on procedures, processes, or things such as this. Now, on my role, why I mentioned I felt relief, because I was wanted everywhere. Everybody wanted to meet me. Now, when it hit, I had the opportunity to stay at home. I can hide behind the computer and do most of my work there initially. And I had more time with my family, and I could enjoy eating delicious food, especially, and also finding that I have a new hobby, which was cooking back then during the pandemic. So I have this the shift from this working from office to working from home to thankful initially, until we notice that a lot of people take it for granted, and then they start hiding behind the screens. And when you have expectations on team members on certain work that has to be completed, and it is not, because, like I mentioned, some of our work used to require us to be face to face. So we found it quite difficult after, although we are also on the Teams platform. Initially we loved it, and initially lots of people had reasons to hide behind the screen, saying that their cameras just don't work, so they have a reason not to have it switched on even after a year has passed, and they still couldn't figure out what happened. And because of that, we realized that productivity in the end went down, not what we had hoped for. And because of that, we still preferred to meet up face to face. Of course, with the loosening measures set by the government, then only we were able to do it after. So if you were to ask me, nowadays I would still prefer working from the office. Because of that, first of all, I would say it's because of the human touch. Some things just cannot be replaced, because we are humans, right? We still need to communicate face to face, and we just need to, because when we communicate, we are dependent on the body language and also vocal variety that the person we are speaking with. And because of that, I just think that it's so important, also especially on the collaboration part, because if we were to do it online, initially it seems to work out fine, but when we were working in the office, it feels more natural. And because, for example, when everybody is there, it's easier to gather up your friends or your team members or anybody from the other departments and say, hey, can we just have a quick meeting just to brainstorm a bit on what the situation is or how we can tackle this issue at hand. And of course, we noticed there were technological issues. I'm not sure about people from other parts of the world, but from where I come from, there seems to be problems with the internet connectivity most of the time. Back when we were all stuck at home, maybe because the line was congested with lots of people using the line at the same time. And of course, I felt that it's better for us to work from office, especially for those of us who wish to have more professional growth, because it just shows that you are more easily seen. People know who you are instead of behind that screen. People just don't know you that well. I think that's all I can share, Hani.
Awesome, Terence. Thank you for sharing from your perspective. And now we know Terence is a work from office kind of guy. But it makes sense too, because if you start working from home and if you're telling me you're flying the flight, I would be really afraid. Okay, so there are a few like very very key thing, but I'd like to highlight on that just now. And both of you mentioned, you have people hiding behind the camera. You don't know whether they're responding or not. You're speaking to black boxes. You don't know whether people are doing multitasking behind the scene. And I share that sentiment because you know that when you are an executor, you probably have a yes and no. But then when you become a team leader, then you have to actually find out what's going on and whether if there's a feedback and people don't respond without the ability to touch you, like or see you in person, it would get a little bit scary. I had the opportunity to work with a company where they're fully online. And because of that, I've learned to use apps that made it work. I may or may I'm in between whether or not I like it, because I do realize that I'm working longer than I've actually worked in office. But I do know that there are a lot of other competencies that you don't know works, and you could see that is the future of like the world or how the working scene would look like. So now this question I'm going to pose to Rozana. Rozana, you mentioned just now about all the things you managed to use apart from Teams that help you to maneuver through your working, your productivity, especially when working from home. Like that's the thing, right? It requires some level of communication because the tool is just a tool, but you need that sense of communication. Can you let us know, were there any hilarious or awkward communication mishap while you were working remotely in your field? Like we want to hear the stories, like anything that pops up into your mind.
I was just laughing at and thinking about what Terence said just now when he said that, they always find an excuse not to turn on their cameras. We all have those excuses as well. And I love the other excuses like, I can't hear you. Can you repeat? Oh, I got disconnected. But for all you know, they could have just pressed the disconnect button. End meeting. Especially if you want to avoid answering a difficult question. So to me, those were just some of those things that we encountered. Is it a technological issue or is it a human? Is it a human issue really? It was always interesting to try to, at the same time, like you try to contact people, right? So you use Teams or even I WhatsApp people or I try to phone them. And then the rule was you have to be behind your laptop and be contactable. That was the rule. Sometimes you dial the number, it says that they're online, but they're actually not online. So where did they go? To the giant pantry? I'm not sure. So that was a bit frustrating, if you ask me. But otherwise, like miscommunication mishaps, not that many. It's just a matter of like the tool itself and adherence to rules, simple rules which are important, because being away from each other, because in the office you have physical reassurance, I'm in the office. But when you're not in the office, you could be by the beach doing some work, nothing wrong with that per se. It's just that you need to be contactable no matter what. Okay, honey.
Yeah, that's the case, right? You gotta be contactable at all times. That reminded me of a very funny story in my own place of work, well, former place of work, online place of work. So we had this like random client coming in, actually dialing in wrong. It was meant to be a selling session. That person thought that this demo call was a different kind of demo call, and we were wondering why he kept asking weird questions. So that uh, pretend miscommunication, we actually use it as a way to maneuver problems with this kind of people coming in expecting a different kind of demonstration. We were like, oh, sorry, we can't hear you. Your internet access must be wrong. Then we like ended the meeting because it was a creep. So like that could be one way to use the mishap, right? But that's a very good one, Rizana. I share with you, and like there's nothing wrong with having meetings by the beach. Like as long as your CEO is not there, probably, and internet connection gotta be good, right? But like, okay, now let's go to Terence. Terence, it must be a little bit more difficult for you, right, to maneuver through. Like, okay, initially you were hands on, and then now people couldn't get to you, not because they don't want to, just because there was a set of rules that they couldn't. So how was it when it comes to the challenge? What was the funniest challenge you faced while working from home? Like any unexpected guest star suddenly appear in your meetings, because your meetings, I'm sure, has a lot of those like surprises. Boom, because you're in the management, so I'd like to hear that.
Yes, definitely. Now, speaking about special guests, I could remember the time when, you see, when we were in front of the camera in a meeting, and that time my daughter couldn't go to school as well, so she was stuck at home. And when she saw that she could appear on the screen, she thought it was a mirror. And what happened was she found my undies and used it as a flag and walked behind me just to parade it around. Because I was looking at sourcing for some documents, trying to explain, trying to have a serious meeting, and then somehow I noticed that the audience inside the meeting started to laugh. So initially I thought that I mentioned something wrong, until I noticed what was going on behind me. Then I had to properly excuse myself, switch off the camera for a while, and invite my daughter over to the other side, come back, and continue on with the meeting, trying to keep a straight face as if nothing had happened. But after that, you notice that it happens. It does happen throughout the whole world itself, and tends to make the meeting slightly more enduring. What do you call it? Enduring. More enduring. Less serious, because these things does happen. It was new back then, so it was interesting to everybody. So yes, it does happen, and it did happen to me. Thanks, Hani.
That is hilarious. I hope you have the recording, because I'm sure Rozana wants to see that now.
I think it has expired already. The recording.
That would be funny, because on the earlier days of Zooms and Teams, the background option wasn't available, right? So people had to literally show how their homes look like. And if you have small kids, you understand our homes is never, like aesthetic would be our second priority. So yeah, that's absolutely it. Yeah, right. Now we've seen that through. Then suddenly we all have to come back to the office, right? So I had this conversation with my husband, and he was telling me about like how his international office, because most of them work remotely, right? And after the pandemic, the whole landscape changes. People work remotely, but they do have HQs, just like all of us. We have like our main office. And usually our main office, when they have celebration, they will invite people from the main office to have celebration. And those remote workers, usually they can't be a part of it. Or at least you'll see them dancing and cheering on from the screen. You sit down and make your own cup of coffee, not even subsidized by the company. Sorry, companies out there. But like, yeah, I'd like to hear, Rozana, like, so when you went back to the office, what was the breakthrough that you had, after like being from home for a while and you had to go back to the office? Like, let us know, like, tell us one of those moments that just clicks to you that, yep, this is definitely more favorable than uh my, initial working from home arrangement. What was that clicks onto you?
I share the same sentiment with Terence. My daughter also insisted I turn on the camera and show herself to the meeting attendees. It's not so much about her. It's more about I was worried about me because I was still in my pajamas. Okay, back to the pajamas. I think for me when I returned to the office, it's just a very familiar environment that I've been operating like that for a very, very long time. And that returning to the office was just sitting here and like knowing that you could contact your colleagues, have that impromptu discussion, bump into someone in the corridor and say, hey, we haven't caught up on that issue for a pretty long time. Want to chat for 5 minutes? Or even that where, hey, can we go grab a cup of coffee downstairs and just catch up with how things are going? It's really nice what Terence said is to have that human touch. I think that for some people, they forget about the people, especially if they're not used to managing a team, that the human touch is something that technology can never replace. And that the ability to be able to connect in the same space, in the same room, is important because you're able to see nuances in which you typically won't be able to pick up in an online meeting if your cameras are switched off in particular. So you can look at body language, facial expressions, you can look into their eye contact, are they zoning out? And then you're able to draw attention and try to capture their attention again into discussing what is important. So I think for me, when I'm sitting in a meeting and I'm physically with everybody else, I think that was when I thought, this is what working from office is important, because you're able to detect those nuances and how can you better connect with the people in order for you to be able to work together and collaborate and achieve the outcomes you want to achieve.
Absolutely, Rozana. Yeah, you know what? Like, I think that's the thing about being with another human in person. You can feel the warmth, the excitement, and you can feel that whether they understood or they don't, and you know how to help them. And that is something that being on screen doesn't work. I find myself quite similar to that. Like when I'm online, I find myself a lot more. I will be over preparing. I'm well alert. Every single senses is open because I needed to be alert, but I didn't have to when I'm in person. But I love that very, very much, because then when I saw Rozana, I can hug her, because in the recent conference, I'm like, Rozana hugs. It was quite similar with my online work. I've never met them before. We all decided that we'll go to KL and meet one another, with the founder and CEO. Well, we met in person. We were like, oh, now we know how tall you are. No, we were obsessed with arranging us of who's taller, who's shorter, because on screen you can only imagine how tall you are. That's a definite. And I think Terence just now mentioned about that earlier on, right? About the human touch part of it. So now, Terence, now most of work out there, even your own work right now, has become somewhat hybrid. you needed to be here and there, but you can also be in the meeting wherever you are. It has made things quite easy for people to jump in on them. Right? This is just like one step before we, what do you call that? We transport into like a different sort of a transportation in the future, right? Like we just like disappear one way, open the, if you watched Doraemon before when you were younger, so this is this like a happy door where you just open, you enter another. Yeah, it feels something like that, because without the human touch part of it. So hybrid. Talking about hybrid, like how has that worked for you in your industry? Like were there things just not working? Did you observe any potential pitfall? Like how in your opinion would you be able to fix it, or how have you been coping up with it, parents?
Yes. Or in our organization, it seems like we're still trying to figure out what's the best way to plan for this hybrid as we are working forward. Of course, we do understand that we cannot stick to either work from home or totally work online, because new generations change, they have new ways of working. We have to accept the fact that they are unable to work from 8 to 5 anymore like how we used to. So we just have to adapt with the changes. And we just noticed that we have to check with them on their expectations, on what they want to, let's say when we hire them, what are their expectations in working with us. We have to understand what we are able to compromise or negotiate with them as well. You can't give them everything. For instance, we tried out with having work from home days on Mondays and Fridays, and somehow it did not work out well, because some people tend to go missing since Thursdays, or missing until Tuesdays, if you understand what I mean. So we're still trying to find a way on how best to do this, because our organization also covers all sorts of generation, from the youngest being Gen Zs and Gen Alphas, all the way up to those who are about to retire in the 60s. We have to find a sweet spot in the middle, and I think we just have to sit down, get to understand what your staffs or your team members really want and need, and we'll work from there. There's nothing really specific on that. It depends on the organization or different environment that you are operating in as well. So I don't have a specific answer for now, Hani.
Okay, awesome. Right, like it is, like you said, a work in progress, right? You have every generation to fit in. It's just like one of those reel that I saw recently. It's about this one. Is a Zoom call, and then there's one of the younger generation, the Gen Z, were doing her nails and having a meeting, and they was discussing, and the boss happens to be probably someone around our age, like mid of our age, quite young too, but was probably already accustomed to working 9 to 5 before she started the business, right? And was questioning like, are you literally, doing your nails while? And she was arguing about what's wrong with that. I am doing my work, it's completed, I'm just going to give you a report, and somewhere I'm the one who organized this meeting. Because if you will look into that perspective, no one is wrong, I would put it that way. But then again, it depends on the company policy, right? I was reading through the comment section earlier on, and they say something about like, well, she was discussing companies, clients, like revenue, so it shouldn't be done that way. Well, there were pros and cons onto either one hybrid model. So, Rozana is an HR, so I'd like to hear from our HR like a different perspective. So one day, Rozana, if you become a CEO, right? Like from your knowledge of HR, Like, what is the one company culture that you would like to instill when it comes to working from home versus and working from the office? Like, share your thoughts. Like, why do you say so?
Gosh. Hmm. Culture is made up of many components, right? It's your office environment, is the people you work with, is the supervisors who have certain ways of work in which you try to adapt or you try to reach a common understanding in which how work should be done. And at the same time, you have to be concerned about what are the company goals, what is the nature of work, what is how historically how has things been functioning and so on and so forth. So there's a hot pot of things you need to take into consideration. I think what's important is about being trying to achieve a level of fairness across all the employees. And I think that's a constant challenge that any organization will have because what Terence pointed out, everybody has their own personal work style. And the second thing is in consideration of your clients. Where are they based? What's their time zone? What is the expectation of the contractual delivery that you need to make for your clients in order for you to succeed as a company in terms of making revenues and profits and so on and so forth. So I think in some sense, it's not necessarily about work from home or work from office. It's more about coming to a common understanding in which A, you have deliverables, B, you must deliver those deliverables on the time in which I expect you to deliver them. And that at the end of the day, if you can demonstrate the level of productivity on top of self-discipline and maturity, then I think we can create a company culture in which everybody would have that level of thinking in which no matter what I'm doing, no matter where I am, I still need to deliver something because that is what is contractually required of me to do. And because I belong in a company whereby I believe in high performance, in order to do high performance, it's about meeting my minimum target or expected target. And if I have the capacity, I will do more. So that's my take, Hani. Not really like a policy per se, but more of like a way of work in which everybody try to find a balance of making sure things get done no matter what. Do I sound like a slave driver?
Well, if you are a CEO, I think hitting the KPI and target is a very important thing. I do believe that the impact that one person gives impact another person, regardless of working from home or office, right? Imagine you have an entire team, and we entrusted one person to do this particular part because that's a part of the drive that gets us to our goal, and that person is not accountable for, or like that person decided like, okay, I don't care about that. That's going to drive the morale down because you're not working for one day, right? You're working for a long term. So I share with you on that sentiment. High performance is the key to it. And as I listen to your points just now, it is also all about like being trustworthy, like knowing that we could count on you. And I think that's a very important thing because a long time ago when I started working, like back when I was in the 20s, 20 years old. Yeah, I'm still around there. I'm not too far. Like back when I started working, it was just execution. So I didn't really see the perspective of the one who had to lead, the one who had the heads hanging, the one that the CEO will come to you and say like, hey, what's going on here? But then you're here now and then you realize, oh, okay, I get it. I understand why I was told to do the way I was told to do, for instance. So yeah, it's not really much of it's not a crime, Rozana. I didn't say if you were to be a CEO. Right. So, okay. Just for the fact, Rozana, I am a high performing worker. I believe so. In case you become a CEO one day, I'd like to hand my resume. Terence too. Okay. we'll go into one of our few final questions now. I'd like to hear your personal insight. Let's start with Terence, right? Terence, share with us your personal insight. What a perfect story or perfect any story at all that captures perfectly why you love or hate work from home or work from office.
I would have to say, after what we've been through throughout the pandemic, and now that borders are open, and we had to work on this project, whereby again it requires a lot of stakeholders to be part of it, and we tried to discuss it over Teams meeting, and somehow the meetings always seem to get delayed. It's either this person or that person is not available or always occupied with other meetings online. And because of that, what we've done is we've had to take the initiative and organize a meetup. And that meetup actually happened in a rural place somewhere in Sarawak, a place called Barrio, where we had to gather all the stakeholders, and we met up at this place. We chartered a flight, all of us, and brought everybody there to be away from connectivity for a while, embrace nature, and we had to have our meetings and be part of nature at the same time. And we realized that the communication was better in that sense because everybody was present at that moment and everybody was not distracted with their phones. And because of that, we managed to sort things out faster. And after that, that got the ball rolling. And so the project is ongoing now instead of always being dragged on, waiting for people to be online. So that's the one story that I can recall of. Thanks, Hani.
Awesome, Terence. I would like to be a part of a Barrio project if I could. You know how hard is it to be able to actually get there. So, well, Terence, that is a privilege on its own, and I think with comes with that privilege, people start working. So, yeah, that's a pretty good one. We have come towards the end of our podcasting session, and we have gathered great insights from both Rozana and Terence. For all of our audience information, Rozana and Terence are also Vivid Voices Toastmasters Club member. You would be able to gauge and get ideas from them if you'd like. If you were to attend future Vivid Voices Toastmasters Club. And if you want to know a little bit more about them, feel free to approach them later. So Terence and Rozana, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing insights coming from both of your perspective, from all of the points that you've deduced just now. At the end of the day, there is no true winner of working from home or work from office. It is actually based on the needs and the wants, and both of them has its pros and cons. At the end of the day, I do believe that nothing is in compared to human touch, but all these tools that is available around us helps to keep us together. I'm in Kuching, Rozana in Brunei, and Terence in Miri. Without this tool, irregardless of whether we can touch each other or see each other in person, we are in for a very good discussion. We had fantastic conversation, and I think because of that, we know that the future of work from home and work from office is still a progress in work. We'll recap again probably this topic in a few years from now. We'll see how our perspective changes. So thank you once again, everyone, for listening to the Vivid Voices Toastmasters Club podcast. The recording session is now over. Thank you very much and see you in the next session.